Yeah, I pulled this out of my wife's wardrobe because I thought it'd be nice to wear a little sundress for this video, so enjoy. Undoubtedly, counter magic is one of the most powerful things to do in a game of Magic the Gathering. Many of the all-time strongest decks that can get ahead on board state and apply the right type of pressure early will fall prey to the mid-range blue deck that's boasting counter spells. But in a game of Commander, we have this high level of card diversity. Moreover, I would argue we have the highest level of board variance out of any format, especially in the more casual spaces. So when we start to run into situations where the board is cluttered and the stack is complicated, and you, the player, need to forward your own game plan, it becomes difficult to evaluate which cards simply didn't perform well in your deck. Sure, the well-timed counterspell definitely does have its merits, and I still run it in many of my decks with a heavy focus on the commander or a more linear pathway to victory. But I'd argue that for most decks, especially with some of the more recent printings, a modal option would be far superior. And a modal spell is one that has, well, modes. This is exhibited perfectly with a card like Mystic Confluence. You can counter something, bounce something, draw something, all in whatever combination that you need at that specific time. If you're ahead and you simply need the cards, go ahead and just draw 3. Maybe the board is the issue, but the stack is empty. Well, then bounce to hand. Or perhaps the stack is the problem and it's cluttered and you need certain spells countered. Well, you know what to do. You suddenly have a card in your deck that does so much more than just counter a spell. And I can hear the comments already. Mystic Confluence is 5 mana. Counterspell is only 2 mana. That's a huge difference. And you know what? I have to concede that point. You would be correct. But my issue, and I would argue the problem, is not the mana cost, but rather the opportunity cost of inclusion. What do I mean by this? Now, if you include a regular counterspell in your deck, you are otherwise taking up a slot that could be used for something else, like a draw spell, for example. Having flexibility in a modal card allows you to fill your deck slot with not only counter magic, but also other effects that have a tangible impact on the game throughout all steps and phases. And there are tons of modal cards under 5 mana that offer so much. Just look at the most recent Outlaws of Thunder Junction set with the Spree cards. Incredibly powerful and versatile, and that's what I want. And that's what we should want in our 99. Now, having 100 cards may sound like a lot, but if you play in enough casual pods and you build your decks correctly with enough draw, you'll often find yourself going through 25 to maybe even 50% of your deck in most games. At least I do, which does initially sound like an argument for an inclusion of a counterspell. If you draw 50% of your deck, that means you likely will have access to the cards you need when you need them. But in practice, this really isn't the case, and it's definitely not a foolproof plan. Many of my friends do have similar engines powering their decks, so they're often also drawing a large percentage of their deck every game, which, well, it results in frequent situations of attrition. Who can last the longest? Insert Family Guy reference here.
Chris, could you please get Hannah a thank you basket and schedule her next appointment? I'd like to see her again in 2 weeks.
The result, as you can expect, varies widely, but most often a regular counterspell which can only take care of a singular threat in the late game is typically not enough to push over the finish line. In these situations, you need value, and that's what many of these spells offer. Let's look at a few examples. We've already mentioned Mystic Confluence, but let's look at the aforementioned Outlaws of Thunder Junction cards. 3 Steps Ahead is an incredible addition to our toolboxes, especially as a blue player. On the surface, it may seem like we're simply overpaying for effects. 3 mana to counter a spell, 4 mana to copy something, 3 mana to filter 2 cards. It all seems a bit bleh, especially when regarded on its own, but it's the combination of effects that makes this card really excel. Let's say that you have 2 cards in hand at a late stage of the game, both are basic lands, and then you draw this. Just take a moment and consider how you would feel if you only drew a regular counterspell. Likely terrible, as in you just lost the game on the spot in pretty much every situation. With this card in hand, however, you can counter something and copy something and filter all those islands out of your hand in one spell. And you know what? You would never care that it's overcosted when it effectively wins me the game when I otherwise was royally screwed. And this is not hyperbole. This situation literally happened to me a couple of weeks ago in my playgroup. These types of modal effects, when drawn late, can be the difference between a win or a loss, or deployed early for good game effects. I think this is a good time to discuss other modal cards. Although I do think that, there are better options for counter magic in Commander, many of which I am showing on screen now, I do think that the power of modal inclusions extends so much further than counter magic, and you could even make an argument, I would say, to replace something like a regular counter spell with an alternative type of modal interaction or modal creature, as we're about to go over. A prime example of this is the card Final Showdown. 2 mana for a dress down effect, 2 mana for a single target protection, or 6 mana to destroy all creatures at instant speed, by the way. And don't forget, you could simply pay 7 mana to give a key creature indestructible on your board while still wiping away all of your opponent's creatures. The card resolves in order of effects chosen, meaning you will always get the indestructible effect first and or the dress down effect first, which can also help you get around your opponent's indestructible creatures, by the way. Pretty useful tech. This card can also rip a turn away from your opponents if a key card, like their commander, has abilities that are required for them to win. That ability on this card is amazing. You can compare it to like the aforementioned dress down, as mentioned, but this is another circumstance where in the later stages of the game, sometimes you just need a dress down effect. Sometimes you need a board wipe. And most often you can't get that on the same card, but now you can. And this card has already demonstrated to be brutally effective in nearly every single game that I've seen it played in. To really demonstrate the flexibility and power of modal effects, I'd like to look at some cards I think everyone is probably familiar with. Archdruid's Charm is 3 green mana for 1, search your library for a creature or land card and reveal it, put it onto the battlefield tapped if it's a land card, otherwise put it into your hand and then shuffle. Put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control, and then it deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. Or number 3, exile target artifact or enchantment. And by the way, it's deal damage equal to its power. They don't fight, so your creature doesn't sustain any damage, by the way. 3 green mana for this effect is likely a lot, to be fair. But in green decks, accomplishing a 3 green pip card is actually extremely easy, and having all of this utility on a single card is actually pretty insane. Obviously, in a certain circumstance, maybe a more tailored combo deck, a Worldly Tutor will just surpass this inclusion. You can ignore this, but in a majority of casual decks, I'd argue that this is strictly upgraded when compared to something like a Worldly Tutor. It can only get you a creature and also only go to the top of the deck. This card grabs a creature or land and goes to your hand for immediate use and lets you play it the turn that you draw it. This card is a snap include in any lands matter deck. Fetch your Field of the Dead, your Maze's End, your Strip Mine, your Dark Depths, your Thespian Stage, your Glacial Chasm, you name it. And you see the utility already. I haven't even started to talk about the other 2 effects, which situationally can be extremely impactful to the board state. This card does a lot. But speaking about impactful, how about we talk about Abrade? I know you weren't expecting that, but let's chat about it. It's 2 mana for it deals 3 damage to target creature, or you can destroy target artifact. Now, it seems rather lackluster on the surface, but this card was and is insane. And I say was because they've printed an analog to this, which I have absolutely been loving, Untimely Malfunction. This is a new 2 mana red card, which has the effects, option A, destroy target artifact. Okay, I'm listening. Option 2, change the target of target spell or ability with a single target. Or option 3, 1 or 2 target creatures cannot block this turn. Let me get this straight. You're telling me that I get this amount of flexibility in a red uncommon for only 2 mana. That is just crazy to me. If you showed this card to someone in 2005, they would literally not believe that this card would ever be printed. It's that strong. And Untimely Malfunction is quickly becoming one of my new favorite cards in my arsenal. And you can get your copy at our sponsor. Oh wait, actually, I'm not sponsored by a card site yet, so hey guys, come here. Closer. No, closer. No, not so close. Okay, got your attention. I need someone to get a hold of TCG Player for me and negotiate a contract, please and thank you. Kisses. On to the rest of the video. Even Abrade has stood the test of time with only 2 options. This card has routinely showed up in my CDH pods, and I've also included it in some of my Canadian Highlander decks. It's really quite good, and you should really give it the respect it deserves by playing a copy in your deck. The last card that I want to talk about is actually not a spell in the classical sense, but rather it's a creature. Hullbreaker Horror. Talk about an actual game ender. Not only is this spell uncounterable, but you can flash it in at the end step of your opponent's turn to allow yourself to untap and then absolutely just take over the game. This card is soft banned in my playgroup because it has such a propensity to end the game, and it does this because it gives you the option to either return a spell to hand or bounce something. It's the combination that makes it so strong. It'd be a good card if it did one or the other, sure, but I doubt it would really see that much play. Again, it's really the combination. Now, I'm including this as a modal option to demonstrate that sometimes real power is in choice. If you are afforded the pleasure of choice in your commander games, it smooths out the game for you, enables wins more easily, and generally means that you're going to have a better play experience. Why would you deny yourself the pleasure? So now I think that we've arrived more or less on the same page, or at least you understand where I'm coming from. I've started to play more and more modal cards because, quite frankly, games go really long, and having the flexibility and utility on the same card for a slight upcharge does sometimes feel bad, but almost always I am extremely pleased to have these types of effects in my hand over a regular counterspell, let's say. If I gave you the option right now to choose between 3 steps ahead, which we've already gone over, or a regular counterspell for your commander deck, I'd hope that you would consider the game-changing dynamics offered by 3 steps ahead as just that, game-changing. And in some cases, game winning. But simple is sometimes better. You may only need a directed counterspell, and for a further breakdown regarding what I view as the best counter magic for Commander, you can click the video in the card or down in the description. I also do just want to point out how you might go about finding cards for your specific Commander deck. Like, you've heard me, but you're like, where do I find these modal cards? Scryfall is your new friend. I want you to go over to the advanced search tab. All you have to do is select your commander's color identity, and then under the criteria section, type in the word modal. This now gives you a full breakdown of all the modal cards that could be slotted into your commander deck. Now, these are not always useful, admittedly, so filtering by the more newer releases or newer sets could be better, but I think it's worth a look to see what modal effects could slot into your deck. You might be surprised to find something perfect that EDHREC never showed you. Just because EDHREC doesn't have the card listed in its top 100 results does in no way mean that it's a bad card. It's just a broken system. In fact, you may find a new favorite. And here's to more consistent games. Have a good game on me, guys. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope it was thought-provoking at least. These types of videos, I like to sort of challenge the norm. I want people to take a look at a certain auto-include that's been in their deck for a long time and reevaluate, does this card really need to be in my deck, or is there a better option that I could slot in now? And I think, hopefully, as I've shown, the answer is likely yes. And I can't go over every single modal card in this video, otherwise it would be delayed by many weeks or months just because of all the scripting and research and playtesting and all that I put into all my videos, but I hope it gives you guys something to chew on, and I hope you did appreciate it. The only thing I'm going to include here at the end, normally I would do like a pitch for my Patreon or whatever, but I would like you guys just to check out my new gameplay series, Commander Showdown. And by the time this video comes out, it may or may not have already aired. There is a new 1v1 series on my channel. We're calling it 1 for 1, where you can watch me duel against some of my best friends with Canadian Highlander or other alternative 1v1 formats. So if you're interested in seeing that as well, please check out the gameplay videos, because I think that there's some really cool and special things coming, including partnerships that I really want you guys to, see and be aware of. But the only way to get that is for you guys to be interested and, of course, to watch the videos. So please support me over there by watching my other videos on the channel. And, of course, subscribing, commenting, and sharing is always great. But mostly, I just want you guys to have some good games with your friends. So go out there and have a good game. Don't forget to love each other, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.